Welcome back. Danielle Knapp here with Astrotherapy. As a reminder, I am a licensed professional counselor and also a certified astrologer. And in this space, we blend those two things together in service of living our most authentic lives. And so in today's episode, I felt like it would be a helpful service to dive a little deeper into maybe some of our natal astrology, specifically when it comes to caring for ourselves during a holiday season, because here we are, the hustle and bustle is here, and while this information will be helpful at all times, I think it's especially helpful right now, even given that grand water trine that we were talking about that activated late October and is going to continue through the first couple weeks of December. So there's a lot up, there's a lot of emotions up. There could be a lot of processing that's being asked of you right now as things just continue to flow towards, through, over, and what can we do to kind of keep our head above water. So what we'll do today is we're going to spend a little time just briefly reviewing what is the moon, what does this represent in our natal charts and in our lives, and then I'm going to go through each zodiac sign as a moon: Aries Moon, Taurus Moon, Gemini Moon, Cancer Moon, and those are timestamped below so that you can just hop straight to your moon and get that little chunk of information. I'm excited. I think that this could be really helpful as we are kind of getting our toolboxes ready for navigating this specific season of life. Okay, so don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video. It really helps to get the information out there to help people who haven't bumped into it yet, in case it might be in service to their lives. And so let's get started, and we're just going to talk about the moon for a minute. And the moon and what that represents in our lives. The moon and the sun kind of work on this polarity, right? We have our solar personality, how we're out there moving and interacting with other people, how we shine, so to speak. And that's going to be our sun sign. But then we have a more private, veiled, intimate planet, which is the moon. And this represents our subconscious territory, some would say even into our unconscious. This is going to be like the great mother archetype. But there's kind of two parts. Like if I was going to anthropomorphize the moon, it would be like the mother holding the baby, holding the infant, because the moon has a lot to do with how do we feel safe? How do we feel nurtured? What's a sense of belonging, a sense of home internally? And it's also our flash in the pan emotions, the reflexive kind of responses that we have, how we process our emotions. That's going to be Venus. That's going to be the heart space. But just that like instantaneous kind of flash up emotions, that's your moon. Our attachment falls into this, and it goes into kind of those psychological levels of self. And the deeper we go with our moons, the deeper we know ourselves. And so some people who have more of a strong kind of sun and solar personality can sometimes really struggle to get in touch with their moon. And then others who have a really strong moon might struggle to, actually be out there and shine out in the world and be in service to other people in their sun sign. And so a way I've phrased this before that people really seem to connect with is that the moon is what we came here to do with ourselves, and that we must do that first in order to access our gifts, to be in our solar personality, to be in our sun sign out there mixing and mingling with others out in the world. And so when we think about, the great mother and the mother archetypal energy, like that warmth and the nurturing, this can also be like a literal mother. I'm not going to say that doesn't show up in birth charts, because it absolutely does. But when we're talking about it today, we're talking about it more in like mothering as a verb, mother as verb. So it's in action, like how we are nurturing ourselves and what we are doing to create a sense of security and safety within ourselves. Okay, and so this is also our connection too often to the past, family of origin, which also makes me think about the holidays where we've got a lot happening, right? There's a lot of opportunity for stress during the holidays. There is a heightened urgency. It's a very expensive time of the year. Sometimes we are traveling, sometimes we are with our families of origin, and there might be a lot of emotions that come up. And so in today's episode, we're going to go into each individual moon, moving through the zodiac, just to discuss some tools that we can kind of keep in the toolbox. Also, maybe some of the shadow parts to just be aware of, to be on the lookout for, so that we can temper that or make sure that we are setting ourselves up to be able to be as open-hearted and present as we can through this busy season. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so first up, we have Aries because we know they can't wait. Just kidding. But we do have cardinal fire coming in first, and we're going to be discussing the Aries Moon. So this is a moon that is ruled by Mars. And so when we think about an Aries moon, we're going to think about some of the values that come up for that moon. And that's going to be freedom, authenticity, and this comes into like freedom of expression when we're talking about the moon and being able to express your feelings and feel like that there's an ability for you to show up authentically. Sometimes we are in situations where maybe it's not appropriate to have a big public display of emotions that we're feeling. And that can, if that is bottled, that can lead to some frustration for an Aries moon. And so when we're tending to the Aries moon, we want to make sure that we are tracking the risk of eruption by noticing what's coming up for us. Because if it doesn't come up as an eruption, sometimes there can be some passive aggressiveness. Like aggressiveness is something that can come up with this script and the way that this moon is able to express and move. The beautiful gifts of the Aries moon is the ability to be in a leadership role when it comes to emotions. So when this moon feels safe, when this moon feels cared for and secure, it actually has an ability to really, be in this forward leader role of how we can move with our emotions in a healthy way. Now, one of the things with Mars being the ruler of this moon, that's going to bring in, Mars is the body, right? So we want to definitely be tracking the physicality and physical activity needed for this moon to stay feeling strong. And so if you're not into strength training, still making sure that you get some of that physical movement, getting your walks in and being able to set time aside, like non-negotiable time to be physically in your body. Aries also being in the fire realm is going to love adventure and risk-taking and all of those different pieces too. So if you're thinking about that in like a specific way, you want to care for yourself. Now, the thing about fire is that it comes on quickly and then it shifts and changes, especially the Aries cardinal fire. So I kind of see it as like a match. It's like these little sparks that are kind of coming up. And so it doesn't burn for long, but we do want to be mindful that we're not burning other people up with our feelings. And so some of the shadow pieces, we mentioned that eruption kind of way that it can move through. Competition can be something that can be sneaky about the Aries moon. Of course, the more passionate emotions, anger, rage, but also joy and excitement, exuberance, the different things that we feel a lot of charge in the body. That's something that the Aries moon enjoys kind of expressing and being with. And so something that I did for all of the moons is a little channeling at the end. And so take this if it feels helpful, toss it if it doesn't, like with everything I always say. But what came up for the Aries moon is the rooster. And when we think about the rooster and being like the first one up and like alerting everybody that the sun is rising, and then I think about emotional leadership and I think about communication and, this ability to be able to communicate even sometimes just to ourselves. So that might be in journaling or, just having an awareness about what is happening internally for us so that we can stay feeling really present, really open and able to freely express ourselves without it being burning anybody up, which is the thing that we want to keep our tabs on when we have an Aries moon. Next, we have the Taurus moon. So this is a moon that is ruled by Venus. So it's always valuable to look and see like what's going on with who is in charge of this moon. But the moon in Taurus this is fixed earth. And we know earth moves the slowest of all the elements, and Taurus is the slowest of the earth. So this is the slowest of the slow. So that being said, it can be very valuable to make sure that you give yourself enough time to do the things that you want to do, to get to the places that you need to get to. Because being in the energy of rushing can be really overwhelming for this moon. This can create a lot of activation, a lot of charge, a lot of frustration. This is a moon that likes to have a lot of space and to move slower than maybe the world prefers in this kind of hustle and bustle time, especially. So that would be the first thing I would suggest for this decadent Taurus moon, is to give yourself the gift of time and to create buffers of time around yourself when navigating this season. And so something else with the Taurus moon, so this is when we think about earth and we think about grounding, there's a solidness to the earth element, to fixed earth. And so grounding is also something that can be really valuable if things start to feel overwhelming. The moon is what we call exalted in Taurus. So it's, it has this sturdiness to hold some really big emotions, which is why one of the reasons why we say that it is in this exalted state, where it's just kind of, it's a beautiful placement that has a lot of really big emotions, but also has the structure and stability to contain and hold these big emotions as they come up. And so when we're thinking about, this moon, we can get into kind of the pop astrology stuff. It's like, have your yummy snacks, make sure your clothes feel good on your body, all the different sensual things that, taste, touch, smell, feel, I guess same as touch, right? All the different senses come into this sensual moon. And let me see my notes right here. Something else that is interesting with the Venus Taurus moon connection that sometimes can come up. This is especially true if you also have Venus in Taurus. Crafting is something that the Taurus script likes. So if you're finding yourself maybe in some situations where there's a lot of sitting around and you need something to do, maybe having a little craft available that you can work on is something that comes up for the Taurus zodiac script. It might be something that moon really enjoys. And then also some other practices that you want to really see if you can incorporate in is, working with the body, like earth is of materials, right? So our bodies are of this earth. So our bodies are materials, and our emotions are going to talk to us through our bodies. And so being able to name sensations as they come up in the body can be a really powerful way to track some of that. Sometimes earth can be really grounded and really rational and actually kind of step over some of their big emotions, which can show up later as overwhelm or a flooding of emotions that can come up. So being able to track sensations in the body, recognize how you feel in your body, and then thinking about the different ways that you nurture yourself through that. A practice that can be really beautiful for this is the heart-brain coherence practice. If you're not familiar with that, what it is it's an imagining of breathing in and out through the heart space, while then rolling the eyes back up, down and back towards the third eye, and holding your gaze. And if you feel strain on the eyes, you just drop your chin a little bit. And you just continue to breathe through that heart space while holding that gaze. And you're bringing these two energy centers online together and creating that alignment and coherence between the heart and the brain. And if there's a mantra that feels helpful, sometimes, I'll do for myself, like, I'm ready to heal, I'm ready to heal, I'm ready to heal, and letting that kind of be there. But even just the pause to take that breath and to hold the gaze intentionally in that direction is enough to kind of to have your both awarenesses open, right? To be able to not only be using the mind and the eyes to navigate, but also the heart awareness that is so deeply intelligent. Okay, and so when I was kind of dropping in and channeling through, it was a snake that came through for the Taurus moon, and the question around, this shedding of the skin. And there's a real vulnerability. It's interesting, we were talking about heart-brain coherence, because something that I think is fascinating about when a snake sheds its skin is that the very last portion of skin that it sheds is the face and the eyes, and the snake actually goes completely blind during that time and must rely on the other senses as a way of navigating through. And so thinking about how you're able to incorporate your other senses in and trusting the wisdom of your body, I think is a really beautiful gift that you can offer yourself. So a Gemini moon is going to be ruled by Mercury, the Greek god Hermes. And when we're talking about air, we're going to be talking about kind of the mental realm. It's very cerebral. I often say that Gemini prefers like a light touch of emotion, and it doesn't really want to go straight into the emotions. And often the intellectual kind of processing piece is the access point into the feelings that we feel in our bodies that are more swirly, nonlinear, ungrounded. And sometimes words actually fall short for our emotions. But if anyone's going to find the words for it, it's going to be an air moon. And so with Gemini, thinking about, being able to be in connection and having lots of social time, which this is a season that tends to really facilitate that. But staying aware of the risk of staying too surfacey with the emotions. So that's something that we always want to be tracking, because sometimes that works. The light touch is all we need, or I can think about this enough that I've thought myself through it. I'm not going to say that doesn't work, because I've watched people who are able to really seem soothed by that moon starts to feel really secure once they have more of the information and they're able to verbally process and talk about it. If there are emotions that are being avoided, though, due to this kind of light skipping along the surface, this moon will experience a lot of nervous system activation. So anytime we're talking about Mercury and we're talking about air, there is that risk of the nervous system, anxiety, things just being a little charged in that way. So this is a moon that I also recommend the heart-brain coherence process, which is again going to bring the mind into alignment with the heart. You're going to hear me reference this for all moons that are ruled by Venus or Mercury, or if there's air involved too. And so when we think about the heart-brain coherence, again, that's going to be an imagining and awareness of breathing in and out through the center of the chest, like imagining the breath actually coming in and out through the center of the chest, while holding the gaze on the third eye energy center. The eyes are kind of rolled back and up, and if you feel strain on your eyeballs, just drop your chin a little bit. And you're just going to be waking up these two energy centers so that you can become aware from both places, because with Gemini, we can get a little bit left leaning to our own detriment. So if we want to stay in that playful, mercurial energy where we can be really social and open and ready for connection and excited about, new topics and conversations, we want to be taking good care of this moon and making sure that it's feeling, seen and listened to when those emotions do pop up. And when I was channeling through for the Gemini moon, the animal that came through was a porcupine. And we know porcupines are masters of boundaries. And so when we think about the porcupine and we think about the quills and we think about, sometimes with the Gemini script, we can get a little bit scattered. And so where do we need to kind of pull it back in to feel like we are contained, so to speak? The moon really wants containment. So we're pulling it back in, finding that containment. But then I think this can also go into the other side of this around, do I respect other people's boundaries? I mean, Gemini is ready to there's a little quip for the air signs that says, Libras are shaking hands, Aquarius says talk to the hand, Gemini says let's hold hands. There's such a desire to be in connection and to be social and just endlessly curious. And so also recognizing, are we honoring other people's boundaries? Not that we're able to do that all the time. Boundaries are an inside job. We have to uphold those ourselves. When we speak them out loud, they're preferences. But when we're relationally oriented and we want to have connections, we will be curious about how other people are feeling in our presence. So that's something for the Gemini moons to also be tracking, if that resonates. To the deeply intuitive Cancer moon. The Cancer moon is a moon in rulership, because the moon rules the zodiac sign of Cancer. So this is a very nurturing, intuitive, sensitive, emotional moon. The moon is able to fully express itself in this zodiac sign and to be fully resourced. And when we're talking about moon territory, we're talking about the internal world, we're talking about the emotions. So this moon can be very, very comfortable talking about emotions, and actually can feel the flip side of that. It can feel very uncomfortable, one, if it's not able to talk about emotions, or if the person that this individual is talking to isn't open to talking about emotions. There can be this kind of disconnect that happens. The things to watch out for with the Cancer moon is that if your needs are not being met, or you're taking on too much from others and their emotions, this moon can get into some of that victim identity stuff, a little bit of like, woe is me. It can become overly dependent on others, and kind of, it's almost like a bleeding out of like, someone help meet these needs for me because I can't do it myself. And so that's something we always want to be tracking with a water moons in general, because there is a kind of this absorption of other people's stuff or the energy around you to kind of come in and infiltrate that. I mean, we think about like a glass of water and you put a drop of ink in it, like the whole shade changes in that water. So having time to come back into yourself and to cleanse, maybe using water to cleanse your auric field, your energy field, your heart space, and really release that which does not belong to you. And so, making sure that if you can get some tub time in, over the holidays, taking your showers. And if doesn't really resonate, having some sort of energetic clearing practice, I think, is really, really important for water moons, especially Cancer moons. And so some of the things that, we can imagine, even just the cleansing waters kind of falling over us and helping us to release, that which doesn't serve us, but being really sensitive and validating your own emotional experience. Because Cancer is sensitive, it's also connected to the past and, your family. So there can be past hurts that get drudged up through being with present day people who you have a lot of history with. And so just tracking that for yourself and being able to validate like those inner little parts who come up, who are really sensitive and really tender. And then that cleansing practice, allowing the waters to cleanse you. And here we are, depending on where your moon is, we have Jupiter in retrograde over there in Cancer. So he could be touching your moon and making it real big, right? He's going to be moving back in like that last decan. So he's roughly 24, 25 degrees as of today, which is November 14th, 2025. So he could be scooting around, making contact, or blending with your natal moon if it's in that last third. So that's just something to think about, again, that this is the mothering archetype. So just that really, being sensitive and warm and open-hearted towards yourself so that you can tap into that nurturing energy that you do embody. And then the animal that came through for the Cancer moon was the squirrel. And the squirrel has to do with preparation. And are we taking care of ourselves? This idea of like, don't forget to provide for yourself, which I think can really be aligned with the Cancer moon, because sometimes the Cancer moon can get so focused on mothering others that we forget about ourselves and our own needs and have become preoccupied with being helpful to others. So that's something just to keep a track of and keeping note of. But getting in water of any sort can be really, really beneficial for the Cancer moon. Okay, moving on to the charismatic Leo moon. So the Leo moon is ruled by the sun. So this is interesting, right? We've got this kind of duality of like, here we have the moon, the veiled kind of private internal, ruled by the sun, the solar kind of how we shine. So this is a moon that often, it doesn't need a lot of privacy. it's actually a moon that maybe prefers visibility. There's something so charming and dramatic and performing sometimes about the Leo moon. They like that attention feels really warm to this fixed fire moon, and being ruled by the sun, and it's a very noble placement. There's a lot around like truth and being in integrity with oneself. This is the lion heart. And so when we think about fixed fire, and again, we're back in the fire where, you know, this is the alchemy. Things are happening really quickly. Things are changing really quickly. This is a fire. This is fixed fire, so it can hold as long as it's being fed. And so when we're thinking about, you know, self-expression is often very soothing for the Leo moon. So to be able to be visible, to be in connection, to be sharing oneself, to be freely expressing oneself is something that feels really satisfying to this moon. Something to note is that sometimes there can be some crossed wires for this moon around attention and love. And that's not always the same thing. And sometimes this moon can be like, any attention, even if it's bad attention, at least means that I'm valued and I'm seen and I'm loved. So that's something to track. How this moon, if it doesn't get to receive the attention it prefers, how do we take care of ourselves in that situation? I think there's something really powerful too, just kind of like on this physical plane and in your, you know, self-care toolbox, you know, getting, you know, that morning sun, getting outside so that the sun, you know, don't stare at the sun, of course, but getting some sunlight in your eyes, seeing, you know, watching sunrises or sunsets are something that can be really soothing to this Leo moon. Let me see, what else did I have in my notes for you Leo moons out here? Oh, and so kind of back to that, if you're not getting the attention that you are looking for, maybe socially or in your family, being able to remind your inner little one that they are special and that they are loved and that you see them. And that can be a really loving self-offering to kind of get you through this busy time and this busy season. And so interestingly, the animal that came up for the Leo moon is the lizard, and the lizard represents stagnation. So when we're thinking about, you know, this is fixed fire, but fire likes to be in process. It likes to be changing and creating that alchemy really quickly. And so something just to, you know, the question we can think about is like, is there something, you know, that we've outgrown, that we're ready to leave behind, or that's holding us down in some way, keeping us stationary when we really want to be moving? And also fears that come up around missed opportunities is something, you know, take that if it resonates. Again, toss it if it doesn't. Okay, on to the very pragmatic Virgo moon. So this is a moon also ruled by Mercury. So Virgo moons tend to really be very logical and very practical. Earth in general tends to kind of lean into like, how do we rationalize? How do we kind of bring this down to earth? These swirly, wild emotions, let's ground them down. Let's make it clear. Let's keep it logical. And so the Virgo moon is very good at this because we have Mercury there in charge. And so just like the Gemini moon, when we have Mercury in rulership, you know, there can be a real busy mind, which we can see Virgo will manifest order and structure in the external world, of things of this earth, as a way to help balance kind of the busy mind that comes up with the Virgo moon, for a sense of structure and a sense of safety, which helps that moon feel nurtured and secure. So when you're thinking about your toolbox as a Virgo moon, it can also feel really nice to have a strategy and a plan in order versus kind of leaving things like really open-ended. That can feel a little bit too ungrounded for the Virgo Moon, which of course, if we're working with groups of people or with family and travel, stuff like that comes up and it happens. But knowing this, knowing like, ooh, that can be something that creates some more of those nerves and gets my nervous system kind of activated, moves me into a more anxious place. And we can have that awareness about ourselves that can help. Often the name it to tame it idea from Dan Siegel of like, oh, I can name the dynamic that's creating this response in my body. There can be a soothing effect from that. So just keeping that in mind, which the Virgo is really good at keeping things in mind. Let's see. So sometimes, there's this kind of like really healthy level of detachment with the emotions that can come up that can create a lot of balance for the Virgo Moon. It also can go too far, and then all of a sudden it's like, emotions, what are emotions? I don't have emotions. And all of a sudden we're riddled with anxiety and we're like, I don't know what's going on. My body's taking over. And that is because maybe we've used those skills to bypass some of the emotional processing. So again, like the Taurus Moon, it can be really helpful to go into the body of tracking sensations in the body as a way to, as a trailhead into getting in touch with those emotions. Again, because we're talking about Mercury, where the heart-brain coherence is a really helpful practice. And so if you've just popped into this little segment, I'll review that again, what that is. So it's going to be an imagining or visualization or intending of breathing in and out through the center of the chest, like imagining the breath actually entering and exiting from the heart space, while also softening the gaze or closing the eyes, rolling the eyes up and back towards the third eye energy center. You don't want to strain your eyeballs. If you do, just kind of drop your chin a little bit. And you're going to hold the gaze that way, feeling the third eye energy center come online, and you're going to continue to breathe. And then what you're doing is you're activating both of these energy centers to be conscious and aware and online, so that when after you take your breaths, you're able to move not only with awareness from the mind, which you're so good at doing anyways, but also awareness from the heart space, which also has a beautiful wisdom and intuitive knowledge that it holds for you to access. And then something, also like having a structured daily practice, and maybe that's that heart-brain coherence, but that has a start and an end date, which is really nice, a nice container for that Virgo Moon. Okay, and so the animal that came through for the Virgo Moon is the wolf. And I just thought this was really interesting, this idea of the wolf and like receiving advice and also giving advice. And a Virgo Moon loves to give advice. And how do you receive advice? And when is it unsolicited? And when is it helpful? And when is it actually a way to try to quickly fix and solve something so we don't have to feel so uncomfortable with whatever's coming up? Because if we have a solution, we can just moving on to the next thing, right? So what is it like to kind of just exist in some of those emotions and work on stretching that window of tolerance just a little bit? We don't want to blow the walls out. We're just stretching a little bit, and maybe sitting on our hands for a second before we jump in with the fix-it idea. The peace-loving Libra Moon. So here we're talking about cardinal air, and this is a moon that is ruled by Venus. And this Libra Moon really prioritizes balance and peace and harmony. And when we think about emotions, they're not typically peaceful or balanced. They tend to just kind of come in and out, and they're very swirly. So that can be uncomfortable for the Libra Moon. Again, we're talking about air, so we're going to be kind of in the mental, cerebral space, but we're also talking about Venus, which is the heart space. And so something to think about, with the Libra Moon is feeling rushed into decision making, because there's a lot of weighing of the scales, like the pros and the cons of things. This can sometimes be interpreted as indecisiveness in the Libra zodiac. And so when the moon is involved, making sure that you don't feel rushed to make decisions, because there's actually something really soothing about being in that mentally stimulating place of weighing both sides of like, well, it could be like this, or we could do this. But sometimes that can be frustrating to other people if they are waiting on you to make a decision about something. So, buying yourself time, buying yourself space to get to be in that kind of weighing the pros and cons and taking your time with decision making, just kind of building that into what to expect from yourself during the holidays can be a beautiful gift to offer yourself, where you might find yourself making a lot of decisions about plans and things that you're doing or buying. And what's coming up, because there's a lot of stimulus to work with during this time of the year often. And so something else, to think about is, because there's such a priority around peace, it can be very unsettling if there's conflict or arguments coming up, even just in the same space as a native with a Libra moon. It can be very unsettling. I feel a lot of stress, again, that the nerves kind of coming up, because here we are talking about air, and it'll get a little angsty. So that's something, noticing how you take care of yourself if conflict does arise or there is confrontation, and being able to be really gentle with yourself as you move through, or at least just be aware of, like, oh, it makes sense that I don't know. I mean, maybe some moons really love confrontation. Maybe some of those Martian ruled moons. But specifically for a Libra moon, it's going to be like sometimes want to crawl out of your skin, kind of uncomfortable if there's confrontation or stress happening relationally between people. Romanticizing your life, or being able to add a lot of beauty into your life can be a way that you really take care of yourself. What is the word? Hygge, like the coziness of winter. Like how can you just really make everything cozy and beautiful around you? The simple things, being able to romanticize that can be another way that you take care of this sweet Libra moon. And then, of course, because we are talking about the heart space and we're talking about air, heart-brain coherence. This is my, I think, 4th time bringing it up in this episode. But if you fast forward just right to this moment, again, what this practice is going to be imagining the breath, breathing in and out through the heart space, and actually intending or visualizing that while also holding your gaze on the 3rd eye energy center. We kind of roll your eyes up and back. And if you notice strain on the eyeballs, you drop your chin a little bit, but you just take some conscious breaths like that, and you're bringing the heart and the brain into coherence so that they are in alignment and are able to both be in service as you move through. And then the animal that came through for Libra is the fox. And we think about, a fox, and it's very resourceful and it's kind of sneaky. But then there's also this kind of this adaptability. And so that's something, take it if it resonates, toss it if it doesn't, but maybe keeping in mind how to be adaptable to the changing, energies that you're interacting with, the different relationships or connections that you're making as you move through, how to stay flexible in all of the different spaces. Scorpio moons, the deepest of the deep, the moons that are truly in the darkest pockets. And so this is a moon traditionally ruled by Mars, modernly ruled by Pluto. So this is a moon that is very private, and it's intense, and it can be more secretive because it does kind of stay in those shadowy places. The thing with this moon is that it does feel really big feelings, and often, as with a lot of water planets and placements, words can fall short in expressing what the emotions are or the sensations that are coming up. And so there's a risk of the Scorpio moon of going mute, of oh, I'm not even going to share anything because language fails me and I'll be misunderstood. But the downside of that is that this is a deeply intimate moon as well. It wants to know other people and other moons and self on a really deep level. And so it can almost feel kind of blocked at times because of language failing to be able to express accurately what's happening for this moon. The other thing to note is a real superpower of this moon is transmutation. The ability to take pain and transmute it into something beautiful. It's taking the lead and turning it into gold. It's alchemy. And sometimes this means that this moon can like attract negativity and pain from other people, because there's this unspoken kind of complementary energy of like, oh, this is a system, this is a person who works in that space of transmuting. So it can sometimes feel like you get dumped on, or there's like a lot of negativity that can come your way. And so being able to kind of set those boundaries and, you know, have some of that, like, okay, what's mine, what's not mine, as with all water moons for sure. I mean, it's porous in that way. This is fixed water, so it's a little bit more solid. We're going to think like ice than, you know, the Cancer and the Pisces, which we'll get into later. But there is that vulnerability that's kind of internally held. And so we want to, because of that vulnerability and experiences of being wounded and having pain, there can be a lack of trust that comes up with that as well. And so we want to be really sensitive to this moon, and for navigating the holiday time, making sure you get a lot of time to retreat, to kind of pull back into yourself, to take care of yourself. You know, being able to find ways to express and emote your feelings, whether that's through art or journaling. But again, if language is failing, music can be really helpful when we're tuning into the experience beyond just words. You know, poetry, music, what is that? It's giving us, you know, a feeling with language. And so that can be really helpful. Something to stay aware of is there can be some tummy stuff that comes up for the Scorpio moon if we're not tracking and tending to our emotions. They can get really dense. Because this moon is traditionally ruled by Mars, we want to have a physical activity also, you know, whether that, and this is a fixed sign, so sometimes some of that endurance, you know, longer walks, running, things that kind of activate the endurance fibers in our muscles can be really helpful. So yeah, really taking good care of that Scorpio moon, having that privacy that you need. If you're going to be staying at a house that's not your house, how can you get privacy in these spaces and find some of that boundary time to take care of yourself? And then the animal that came through for Scorpio is the butterfly, which, as we were just talking about, transmutation, you know, metamorphosis, and this idea of like the being in the cocoon, going to goo, and then the emergence as the butterfly, and what that brings up symbolically, if that feels helpful. You know, there's the, you know, how to be patient, you know, when things are hard, you know, that. And Scorpio is an incredibly patient zodiac. It is willing to wait. It's the scorpion in the cracks, waiting for the perfect time to come out. And watch out. That's another thing to watch out for and track your stinger, because, you know, this isn't a moon, you know, Scorpio zodiac isn't a zodiac that goes out looking for a fight, maybe like the other Mars zodiac, Aries. But this is a zodiac that's absolutely ready for a fight if one happens to fall in her lap. So she's ready to defend. She's got that stinger. Okay, so that's it for the Scorpio moon. And now we're going to move on to Sagittarius. Next, we're moving on to the adventurous Sagittarius moon. So here we are with mutable fire, and this moon is ruled by Jupiter. And so, you know, we think about Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, and it tends to expand and make everything it touches or rules larger. So this is kind of a larger than life moon. This is, you know, Sagittarius is a centaur shooting the arrow to the sky, looking for truth, right? It's always seeking truth. Like, what is the ultimate truth? And very adventurous, very optimistic. And this is a moon that is feeling its best when it's getting to constantly like expand its worldview and its horizon. Sagittarius also loves to learn through context and like immersion learning. And so when we're thinking about this moon and like feeling secure and self-care, like that seeking higher knowledge can be something, you know, expanding through thoughts and concepts and philosophy, being able to have those kinds of rich conversations with other people is something that this moon really enjoys. There's also this ability to sometimes sidestep the emoting of emotions, the emotionality that comes with emotions, with this moon, because this moon can almost be excited to have emotions come up, so it can use it as a trailhead for self-discovery, as a learning point, like an entry into learning more. Like, oh, I'm so triggered by this, I wonder what's happening, and oh, what's within me and my history that's waking this up. There can be a real resilienceness and excitement that can come up when those emotions stir. And so something that can be a little tricky is compassion can sometimes be a little tricky for the Sagittarius moon to offer others or to self, because it doesn't want to stay in any of the exhausting or draining emotions. And so to witness somebody else in that space can be kind of a like, oh, I don't want any of that. So that can be something that sometimes can block deeper levels of intimacy at times, the kind of intimacy that takes like time and commitment to come into, because the other thing with the Sagittarius moon is that it's here to have lots of different experiences. And so it can actually not be in service to try to like lock ourselves into a specific role or career, when there's like this desire to have a lot to taste and to get to have your experiences in many different places. And so that's something to track, but also to know it can have a shadow side of preventing like creating really deep, meaningful relationships that require a certain level of commitment and compassion. Something else, because it's ruled by Jupiter, there can be a righteousness that comes up, around like beliefs or knowings or knowing more than somebody else. There can be kind of sometimes in a shadowy, like a moon that's feeling uncomfortable or not really secure, like it's not getting its needs met. It can express a little bit more with that kind of like, well, if you don't know that, like false hierarchies can kind of come up with that around like being better than or less than. And so, that's something just to keep your finger on. But yeah, when you're, getting to socialize, this is often the height of Sag season is the holidays. So there's a lot of, the gathering together, having parties and, celebrating, that's so much fun. And it's right there in alignment with the different traits of the Sagittarius script. And so when I was channeling through for this one, the antelope came up. And the antelope, it's interesting because that is an animal that relies on the herd for nourishment. And so there's a real community-oriented aspect piece. So if you're noticing community being on your mind, are you feeling nourished from your communities? Are you needing to find community? Do you need to pour back into community so that you can lean on community at a time when you're going to need that support? Again, take it if it fits, toss it if it doesn't. That was just what came through for the Sag moon. Okay, moving on. And now we'll discuss the serious, practical Capricorn moon. So this is a moon that's ruled by Saturn. And we know the Saturn archetype is the fathering archetype. There is discipline, hard work, restriction. Saturn often teaches us through lack, whereas like Jupiter teaches us through abundance. Saturn teaches us by like withholding often. And so, this is an Earth moon. This is cardinal Earth. So there is a deep desire to have a level of stability and grounding and some rational grounding for the swirly emotions that come up, because Capricorn moons like to okay, well, what's real and true in this? It likes to really cut through maybe all of the different fluff of emotions that can come in. It's like, what's real and true? What do we work with? What's a strategy? How do I master this? And it's the sea goat. How do I take this to the top of the mountain and get us set up and feel like, okay, check, got that mastered, moving on to the next thing. And it's called the CEO of the zodiac. It works hard. This is a hardworking zodiac sign. So the moon works hard in the sign of Capricorn. And, something to think about is that a Capricorn moon can be quite sensitive. It just can be a little bit more restrained in how it's expressing. And it really wants to have that kind of that plan, that way to be able to create some structure around the swirly, ungrounded experience of having big emotions. And so, something with this moon that can be really helpful if, with the busyness of the holiday season or being around a lot of people, is to take breaks and to be able to have some solitude time to kind of come back to yourself and to check on little parts, if they're waking up, to be able to validate them and make sure that they're feeling, safe and secure, and that all the emotions make sense, right? That all the big emotions there's no right or wrong when it comes to emotions. They just are. And so being able to tap into the younger parts of self can often help us access more of our own vulnerability in order to create deep and meaningful connections with other people. But as far as like practical tools, like, again, tracking sensation in the body can be really helpful for this moon, because we're talking about an earth moon again. And having a plan, being able to have a strategy and a plan for, to feel prepared going into something can be really essential for a sense of stability as you move through a lot of different energy fields and different environments through the holiday season. Something to note, not that it's, again, right or wrong, there can be a real stoicism to the Capricorn moon, a real seriousness that can come up. So infusing some play can be great for keeping some flexibility with that moon. Things that the Capricorn moon would enjoy, the different strategy types of games can be something fun that we do if we're finding ourselves with a lot of downtime during the holidays. There's the tropes of pop astrology, like getting your business plans set and working on those can feel really satisfying to the Capricorn moon, because that is something, if there aren't kind of goals or things that the native is working towards, that can feel really uncomfortable for the Capricorn moon, especially, to not kind of have something that's like that they're working towards, whether that's something that they're learning, a goal that they have in an area of life or business. And so, noodling on what feels inspiring and energizing can be another beautiful way that we take care of this moon. Okay, and so when I was kind of pulling through, the horse came through, which is funny when we think about the workhorse. I mean, the horse does symbolize like fortitude and strength and being able to, work quietly and consistently in the background. I'm peeking at my notes for us right here. And so this like focusing on process rather than reward can be something that is really helpful for the Capricorn moon. So just something to think about, like sometimes we can get so focused, especially with, the goals and like achieving with the Capricorn moon. And it's like, can get overly focused on the end results versus the process through. And how do we kind of drop in and enjoy the journey, so to speak, and allow that to be just as fruitful and enriching as the end goal and the outcome. Aries Moon. And so this moon is ruled in traditional astrology by restrictive Saturn, and in modern astrology, the kind of quirky genius Uranus. And so when we think about some of the keywords that come up with the Aquarius mansion, we will often think about like an independence. There can be detachment, and sometimes that's a healthy level of detachment, kind of like what we talked about with the Virgo moon, that there's this ability to kind of be slightly detached from maybe emotions. We're back in the air moon, so we're back in that mentalizing, cerebral space with the emotions, the swirly emotions, and like to really think about the information that we know, study, talk about, communicate, what's happening with our emotions as a way of processing. It can sometimes come off as cold if the level of detachment seems like it's like really removed from what's happening. Something that can be tricky with this moon specifically, because we think about how personal and intimate the moon is. It's very individual. And Aquarius tends to like it to look at things in groups, like as a group. Like there can be an abundance of compassion for like a group, but really struggle to express compassion to an individual within that group. So it kind of goes to this really abstract level often. And so that can be something that can struggle even for like self-compassion. Like we could have compassion for like a theme, you know, let's say that we experienced a form of neglect as a child. There can be like incredible compassion from the Aquarius Moon for all neglected children. But let's say, and then say self is one of those neglected children, it can really struggle though to like offer that on the individual level. So that can be a growing space for the Aquarius Moon to be able to tap a little bit more into that, that compassion. And so the, you know, breath work for air moons can be really helpful. Taking deep breaths, being able to move into, you know, a less nervy place and more of the embodied place versus out of the mind where it can get kind of spinny at times, especially when we've got Uranus's influence here. That's kind of the lightning bolt, can kind of come in flashes and can feel like, whoa, like all these new ideas and a lot, and it's moving quickly. Uranus is kind of the higher expression of Mercury, and we know Mercury is the mind and Uranus is kind of that higher mind. So there's also that freedom loving kind of piece too, that like having time to step away from groups. Even though there's a real desire to be part of a group, there can be a real exhaustion with the individuals of groups. So being able to have some time, some independent time, is really valuable to the Aquarius Moon. And actually, I mean, just really like getting into some of the emotions is typically like the task for the Aquarius Moon, because it does kind of puff it out a little bit and kind of leave it out here. So finding ways to invite that in gently when it feels appropriate and when you feel grounded and resourced to do that. And so the animal that I channeled through for this one is the ram. And so this is interesting when we think about the ram and we think about determination. And, you know, again, take this if it feels helpful, toss it if it doesn't. But sometimes there can be a rigidity with this, with the ram. And so we want to find ways that we can stay flexible and adaptable to what's happening versus like forcing ourselves through or ramming through anything, that kind of bulldog mentality. It's like, okay, how do I step back into that really wise observer, which comes very easy to the Aquarius script, to be in an observer position, to kind of move into that and then figure out how to be flexible and how to stay open, maybe even add a little bit of optimism, which isn't always something that feels readily available. Sometimes, you know, everybody's unique and individual. So these are just kind of generalized stereotypes and statements when we're thinking about how do we take care of ourselves. But tracking the nerves, you know, we got Uranus involved. Let's track the anxiety. Let's track the nervous system. How do we take care of our nervous system? Grounding out on the earth, taking deep breaths, slowing down, being able to track the body, getting some movement in, you know, all the different nervous system healing work that we can do, which is subtle, it's quiet, it's little things, getting close to plants, finding someone with a grounded nervous system that you can be near and that will help you ground your own nervous system and co-regulation. So those are some tips for the Aquarius Moon. And finally, we get to the intuitive and empathetic Pisces Moon. So the Pisces Moon, which is mutable water, is a very porous moon. We talked about that with all the water moons, that there can be infiltration from external sources because water is so open in that way. It takes the shape of whatever container it is. It receives whatever is put into it. Pisces especially. And so I kind of see it as they're like the sponges, kind of really taking on everything around them. And so as we talked about with the Cancer Moon, having some sort of auric cleansing practice, utmost importance for the Pisces Moon. Because what happens with the Pisces Moon is there can be so much of this coming in from the external, and then it gets so blurry of like, what's mine, what's not mine. This feels out of control. One way I can feel back in control is to make it all about me, and this is all mine, so I need to change something within myself, and then, you know, it must be my fault, whatever it might be. Shadow octave of Pisces is a lot of martyrism. And so, but when we can have that clear, and we can notice, oh, this is coming in, but actually isn't mine to process, we can release that and feel much more secure as a water moon. But it takes practice for sure. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Pisces is ruled in traditional astrology by Jupiter and in modern astrology by Neptune. And it feels very Neptunian when we kind of get into that high level compassion. There's like the spidey senses of a Pisces moon. I mean, when it's feeling clear and it understands self versus others stuff, the read on people can be instantaneous and dead on, because it has these antennas that can go out and just really pick up on all the things that are not being said. And so something, you know, that can be helpful when we're practicing kind of these emotional and energetic boundaries is a mantra of like, not mine, not now. Return to sender, whatever feels kind of available. A more maybe loving way, I release you to your blessings, is something you can say when you feel someone else's stuff starting to come in. And again, this takes a certain level of knowing oneself to even recognize when that's happened, because it's actually really instinctual for the Pisces moon to kind of sop everything up around them. And so the more that we can recognize, okay, what is mine? What is theirs? How do I release that? The more secure and safe this moon feels, because there's something really beautiful about bringing in someone else's stuff. Means that you can feel them on a really deep level. And when you can feel somebody else on that deep level of empathy, you can create really deep, intimate, meaningful relationships pretty quickly. To be able to know somebody on that, you know, the true meaning of intimacy, see into me. And so it's a beautiful gift, but also can lead to empathetic burnout. It can lead to overwhelm. It can lead to martyrism, kind of victim identity stuff that can come up, because it's just so burdened with the world, collective energy, individuals' energy, and then our own personal stuff that we need to process through. And, you know, the Pisces moon, all of us actually have the ability to help other people process their stuff through empathy. And when we use that consciously, it's such a gift. If like someone is experiencing grief and you step into it and you start to feel their grief, you're actually taking a portion of their grief and moving it through your energy body in service. And that is lovely. When we're going around doing this unconsciously to everybody, everywhere, all the time, we can become really overwhelmed. And what can happen is we can actually harden our hearts and close off and remove ourselves from being close to other people because it's been so overwhelming. So it's really in service to work on those energetic boundaries and have clarity of like what's mine and what's somebody else's. Where do I end and the other begins? And sometimes imagining, you know, like zipping up a bubble, like imagining a zipper, you know, before you go into a space where maybe you know there's going to be big emotions. You can imagine, sometimes I'll take my hands and just whoosh, do this. You know, I just imagine zipping up from the bottom of my feet, my auric field, all the way up to the top, creating a clear boundary for me to exist and others to be with their own energy. And even if that does nothing, it keeps you conscious and aware, because you're taking a beat to pay attention to this. And when you're paying attention to something, things change, right? The observation effect, like the more that you pay attention to something, the more things will change, because nothing can show up the same when it's being watched. So the more awareness we bring to it, the more dynamics begin to shift. Okay, so let's see. And so with Pisces, you know, having meditations, visualizations to help clear the return to sender idea. And the animal that came through for the Pisces moon is the bobcat. And so thinking about the bobcat and, you know, how we journey through, you know, and the preparation that comes with that animal, and preparing for a hard journey, maybe taking care of yourself, knowing that you're about to embark or are already on a journey that's asking of you for endurance. And, you know, there's not a quick resolve to this. You need to exist in maybe the tension for a while. And if that's true, how do we kind of stretch our window of tolerance so that we can be there? How do we have those clear energetic boundaries? Because we've got enough of our own stuff that we need to work on without kind of picking up everybody else's right now. And, you know, the emotional landscape of the Pisces moon is very swirly. And sometimes, like the Scorpio script, like words can fall short around like what all the different levels and intensities and aspects of emotions that are moving through that system. And it's a beautiful it's very psychic often, moon that can like just it can read and tune into so much that's happening, but then also can feel really overwhelmed. Like I can't find the words to like bring my prefrontal cortex back online to be able to name it, to tame it. And so that's something just to keep track of, just to notice, you know. And also working with dreams is a beautiful thing that a Pisces moon can do. Since we're dealing with Neptune, you can do some dream work, some dream journaling. That can be something, a tool to keep in your toolbox. Okay, and so we visited all 12 of the moons. And of course, as always, these are general suggestions, stereotypes, tropes, the kind of the high level, you know, interpretations of these moons, because everybody has different things happening with their individual moons, right? We can have conjunctions, we can have our moons talk into other planets across a chart that are really going to shift the way that they show up. And so if you want to go deeper with your individual moon, definitely reach out to me and we can get a birth chart reading. If you'd like to do a birth chart reading, my website is danielleknapp.com, and you can book directly through that website. And if you're in the state of Texas and interested in working together in a therapeutic way, my therapy website is startwithintherapy.com. And so I hope that this was helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know your moon, and if this felt helpful for your moon, or any suggestions you might have for your specific moon that other people viewing the video could watch, and add that to their toolbox as well. Okay, wishing you many blessings. I will be back soon with more astrology updates as we continue to navigate this grand water trine, and you know, our favorite word of the last few years, of these unprecedented energies that are coming in as things continue to speed up, and we are sailing straight towards the end of the year. So I'll be back soon and holding you close. Bye-bye.